Part 2. Complex partial jacquard. That is, there are multiple partial jacquards on the cloth. We need to draw a lot of flowers here. Let's begin. First, select and copy the part that needs to be drawn partial jacquard to the intarsia layer. Then draw the desired flower pattern here. Use the image import tool to import the flower pattern, or you can draw it yourself. Copy. Then paste it in the intarsia layer. Paste. Put it where you want. For example, we want to draw such a partial jacquard. Other parts are normal knitting with front. Only the position of the flower is for jacquard. Change the color code in the intarsia layer. Here we use number 3 yarn feeder. When fill it, you will find that the flowers will be erased. So we can use the shielding color tool. Shield 2 and 3 colors. When we draw rectangle with color 3, we will leave colors 2 and 3 on the canvas. That is to say, the background of the clothes is knitted by number 3 yarn feeder. The front part of the partial jacquard is knitted with number 2 yarn feeder. The yarn feeder number 2 is used on the left and can no longer be used on the right. So here we need to change the color. The knitting position of the yarn feeder is on the left or to the left. Then we use the yarn feeder on the left. If the yarn feeder used is biased to the right, then use the yarn feeder on the right. The yarn feeder on the right can be changed to the color 14 or color 15. Sorry, it is better not to use 15 yarn feeder here, because the right color is knitted with yarn feeder number 5. It is best not to use the yarn feeders with the same guide rail in a pattern. Number 14 yarn feeder can be used here. This is step 2, draw the intarsia layer. Step 3, draw the jacquard layer. The jacquard part is copied to the jacquard layer. Fill it with the representative color code of the back knitting form. The part without jacquard on the outside is filled with color 0. What is the back knitting form of this flower? You can find it in function line 216 if I want to use mesh. Its representative number is 8. Let's fill it with color 8. If the pattern is more complex, you can also select to change the color by the Change Color tool. Sometimes each jacquard in the pattern uses a different back knitting form. For example, I use mesh here. Here is 1x1A. Here is 1x1A2. Different back knitting form can be drawn in one row of the jacquard layer. This depends on our own design requirements. Another point to pay attention to in the jacquard layer. The area of color 0 in jacquard layer means that there is no knitted back knitting form, just knitting with front. The yarn feeder in the color 3 area in this row will be floating line from the left to the right. It will affect the effect of this pattern. So usually we will add back knitting form to this place as well. Does not affect the pattern on the front of the clothes. It will not affect the knitting. We can do it with one tool, modify jacquard organize. Select area first. Just click. All partial jacquard areas adjusted. Drawing the jacquard layer is OK. Step 4. Draw partial jacquard marks on the part with intarsia. Right-click Partial Colors. Or choose partial 2 colors for the part of 2 colors, and choose partial 3 colors for the part of 3 colors. It is recommended that choose partial colors. The back knitting form can be chosen at will, because we have drawn the knitting form in the jacquard layer. Setting yarn feeder group. using a copy tool. Only need to fill in the line with drawing. In the intarsia layer, yarn settings. The first group has been set in the ordinary local jacquard part above, so need redivide into another group, such as group 2. If a yarn feeder group is shared, the knitting area of the yarn feeder will be wrong. It is recommended that you set different groups for different partial jacquards. Set the second group of yarn feeders. The last step, compile. Let's take a look at the knitting action. It is mesh. The jacquard drawing on the right is 1x1A. It is 3 and 14 yarn feeder knitting on the right. The jacquard drawing is 1x1A. Right is mesh. If the flowers are different colors, for example, yarn feeder 4 is used here. Here is yarn feeder 16. When more yarn feeders are used and the knitting area is different, it is recommended that you copy the part of the jacquard layer to the jacquard area layer. The yarn feeder will be used for knitting, according to the scope of this area. This area can only be knitted with the yarn feeder used in the corresponding intarsia layer. Yarn feeders in other areas will not come to knit. You can copy this part to the jacquard yarn layer, if you are worried. Jacquard yarn layer is grouped for yarn feeders. You can specify that the yarn feeder in this area is the third page or the third group. Each area is a different yarn feeder. So divide them into different groups in jacquard yarn layer. Divide them into 4 groups. Specify yarn feeder numbers in these 5 groups. Group 2. Number 2 color area is only knitted with number 3 and number 14 yarn feeders. Then page 3. Page 3 is the position of drawing free of the jacquard yarn layer. Page 4. Click Auto. Page 5. All are the corresponding yarn feeder numbers in the intarsia layer. This is the usage of jacquard yarn layer and jacquard area layer. Compile. The result is the same as when the jacquard area layer and the jacquard yarn layer were blank. But if there is no painting, the yarn feeder may be confused. It may be knitted in other areas. If you encounter this situation, you can use the jacquard area layer or the jacquard yarn layer to limit the knitting area of the yarn feeder. In this way, the yarn feeder will not be knitted in other areas. Then this is the step of drawing multi-area partial jacquard. Lesson summary. Step 1. Draw a knitting action on the pattern layer. Step 2. Copy the partial jacquard part to the intarsia layer. Draw the pattern on the front of the cloth, in the intarsia layer. Step 3. Define the type of jacquard back knitting form, in the jacquard layer. Different areas are knitted different back knitting form of jacquard. Here we need to adjust the jacquard organization chart with this tool. If necessary, set the yarn feeders used in each area in the jacquard area layer and the jacquard yarn layer. This step depends on the pattern. Simple patterns can be omitted. A relatively simple pattern like this does not need to be. If the pattern is very complicated, the yarn feeder may kint from left to right. In this case, we have to limit the knitting area of the yarn feeder by the jacquard area and the jacquard yarn layer. In the jacquard area, the numbers represent the knitting range of the yarn feeder. Different locales have different numbers. In the jacquard yarn layer, the numbers represent the group of yarn feeders. Step 4. Set the partial jacquard mark in the function line 216 knitting form. That is, the partial jacquard part drawn in the intarsia layer is marked with partial colors. If the jacquard yarn layer has drawing yarn feeder group, then there is no grouping in the function line 216. Compile. That's all, thank you.